South Africa has escaped a recession, well, just about. Registering growth of 0.6% in the second quarter of 2014, the ANC expressed relief, but economists are worried. They say South Africa needs to implement some fundamental changes if it wants to improve economic growth. Well, here's one company, Action Coach, that says developing business coaching helps grow profitable companies that contribute to economic growth. Let's welcome Harry Welby-Cooke, who is the joint Southern African master licensee of the largest business coaching company globally. Welcome to Leading Opinion, Harry. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Why is business coaching so important to an economy?
Well, I think in the intro you said it as much. GDP growth is not what it needs to be. And in order for us to get that economic growth coming through, we need to develop businesses. Now, the reality is if you look at the current scenario, we open the newspapers, we hear about downsizing, retrenchments. Corporate companies are not employing more people. And with the challenges facing government, they themselves are having to do more every year with less. So unless we're really growing businesses, we're not able to really contribute back into the economic growth and therefore aid things like unemployment and all the rest of it.
Let's talk a little about Action Coach. You're the joint master licensee for Action Coach Southern Africa. Since you've taken over, since you've taken this post, how many businesses have you managed to grow profitably in Southern Africa, and how many coaches do you have working at Action Coach?
Okay, so we launched in South Africa in 2007. It's actually a global company that this month we celebrate our 21st anniversary. So we operate in 56 countries around the world now. In South Africa, we've got a team of 34 business coaches who are 100% focused on growing entrepreneurs and their businesses. Typically, we run a client base of 250 to 350 one-to-one clients at any given stage. We also do some group coaching programs. But we really work with the business owner one-on-one in growing their business, much like a sports coach would. And therefore, because the relationship tends to be long-term, it tends to be very focused and specific, the results tend to be quite significant in the process.
Give us a sense of the businesses that you work with. The nature of the businesses,
Sure.
what criteria do they have to meet to actually qualify to work with one of your mentors or coaches?
We've got a range of different products and services. So even if somebody is really in a small business, the mom and pop shop as we call them, or one-man bands, we've got more a group coaching program that is easier on the investment, I suppose, so that's better, and then on the timing. Because coaching works if you invest back into it, much like your health. You can't go once a week and do nothing in the off time. So it's a bit of a focused process. I think on average, if you had a look at it, our clients would typically be in the 5 million to 200 million rand turnover. That's the bracket for the one-to-one coaching. But really across industries, we see both retailing, wholesaling, manufacturing, services-related business, and often services-related businesses specifically are good clients because you are the specialist in that company. So whether you're the doctor, the plumber, the chef, you understand the concept of the service that you're delivering because that's what you studied or that's what you learned.
Sure. Give us a sense of a coaching session. I'm assuming that the mentor will have to go in and understand that particular business to be able to say this is the areas we need to work on.
So what we do before we even get to doing business, we've got an open process of discovery. We learn about the client learns about us before we do what we call a business diagnostic. And that's like going to the doctor, having an assessment done, and he says, well, this is what I think's wrong, and here's some diagnoses of how to fix the problem. So once that takes place, we then go in and do typically what we call right up front an alignment. And an alignment is taking what the owner of the company wants, or the owners of the company, and saying, how do we build a company that delivers to that? Because too often we become a slave to our company. We start a business, we've got all these great ideas around why we want to be in business for ourselves, but we end up being the slave to the business. So we get that alignment process right first. And then we break down what seems like often a mountain to climb into bite-sized chunks. So we would do a specific quarterly plan. We plan in 90-day cycles with the client and then work it back to an implementation schedule almost. So you'd meet with a client, with a coach once a week. You'd come in for a session. We'd review what's happened in the past week, double check on what the results have been, and then implement the strategy again for the week to come. There'd be some behind-the-scenes support in between sessions, but basically a weekly focus for some clients already 5-6 years in.
Wow, it sounds like quite a comprehensive, in-depth process to go through. Coming back to South Africa's challenges now. The big focus is to expand growth, GDP quarterly, annually, so that we can create meaningful jobs. We can add jobs to the economy. The biggest challenges, according to some experts, first of all, is weaker global demand for South African, weaker appetite for South African produced goods and services. And then we have domestic issues. We have the labor issue. We have the number of strikes increasing. What are the challenges from an entrepreneurial, small business perspective that's holding growth back?
Well, I think a number of those factors obviously play a part. If you look at the strikes that we had, there were entrepreneurs who literally shut down their businesses whilst these companies were going through the strikes or whilst we had the metal workers strike. So it definitely plays a part. I think the more important thing is you need to stay ahead of the challenges and the frustrations. I think we were largely almost protected. When the world went through the recession years, we didn't have that. And for a large part of the late 90s, early 2000s, business was relatively easy. You could open up a business, and if you reasonably knew what you were doing, you would have customers. Now you're having to work a lot harder.
We actually hit 7% growth in 1994.
Exactly. So it was pretty easy to run a business. The difference is now you have to work harder. Now you have to really approach it very strategically. You have to do a lot better planning, and you have to be in control of different elements of the business. And that's often where the danger is. Because we love the product or we love the service that we offer in that business, we don't realize that to make it successful, we have to do sales and marketing, we have to manage finances, we have to manage team and staff, which comes into the labor issues that we face, and how to understand all of those in a very complex, very dynamic, very fast-paced environment is often the challenge. And that's I suppose, why we have an industry, because if any athlete in the world, no matter how long they've been at the top of their game, would still have somebody giving that outside perspective, somebody tweaking what needs to be done in their game or their discipline, why would a business owner think that he could do it all on his own whilst the challenges and the frustrations are much bigger?
So very tough, very challenging time for business right now. And you pointed out that corporates are not hiring, they're holding back small businesses. Some of the entrepreneurs closed up because of the strikes. There's this element of fear. So we're not going to expect more entrepreneurs to actually come out to say this is the best time to actually start a business. Some experts are saying that the answer to some of South Africa's economic woes lies in unlocking the potential of the informal sector, because like most emerging economies, we have a huge informal sector. Do you agree with that? And how difficult would it be to actually bridge the gap between the formal and informal sector, especially looking in the space of entrepreneurship development?
Absolutely, and I think we're already seeing that. We've got a new small business ministry, a lot more focus in getting that grassroots entrepreneurship right. I think the trick is always to balance it across the levels. So what we're looking at, if you look at South Africa's growth since '94, a large part of that has been in establishing a much bigger middle class. So whilst there's been work at grassroots level, there's also been the growth in the middle class sector, which has helped. And I think that's sometimes what's lacking in the entrepreneur development space, is that a lot of focus in startup businesses or in the informal sector. Now, the danger with that, and there's some very interesting stats around that, is that a lot of those entrepreneurs are subsistence entrepreneurs. They can't get a job, and therefore they're now...
So they're just eking out a living.
They're just eking out a living, and they don't want to necessarily grow a business, employ staff, go national, go international, those kind of things. They need to put food on the table. So it's good to give that person training, good to get them in the market, good to professionalize that kind of startup informal stage. But at the same time, you need to develop existing businesses. Because if we be frank, you can't go to school and learn how to run a business. So more and more the education system is starting to talk that way. My kids have entrepreneurship days, as many parents and their kids have at school. But you can't go study how to run a business. You could do probably an MBA in entrepreneurship, which is the closest, but you learn out of a textbook. When you open the doors and all of a sudden your clients aren't paying you, or your staff have got personal problems, you don't learn how to deal with those things. And that's why many of our clients have been in business for 20 years themselves, and they need a coach. So I think the focus going forward needs to be, yes, getting more people into business and more startups and more incubators and more, as you said, grassroots kind of stuff. But at the same time, as much focus into growing existing businesses where the results will be much quicker, much faster.
I suppose if you're inspired, if you're driven by something that you feel very passionate about, nothing is going to stop you. You're going to go out and you're going to make yourself a successful entrepreneur and learn whatever skills you need to learn in that process.
Well, that's often the danger, and Brad Sugar is the founder of our company globally. says that, you know, entrepreneurs are those funny people that work 100 hours for themselves so they don't have to work 40 hours for somebody else. And that's often because of that passion.
Yep.
They've got the passion, they've got the commitment, they've got the drive.
You've got the creative space.
They can take the challenges.
That you don't have in a normal job.
That's right.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, these tough times, whilst most people are fear-stricken to now take the risk, it's those true entrepreneurs driven by passion that see this as the right opportunity. And what we are then able to do with them is just steer them and guide them to make sure that that passion is harnessed. Because often that passion, whilst almost a fundamental to success, is also danger. Because
Can run wild.
Can run wild. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was a pleasure chatting to you. I hope to have you in studio again soon. Thank you so much for your time, Harry.
Thank you very much.